Good evening. My name is Lee Meyer, and I am the program chair of the Front Royal Women's Resource Center. We are an organization, a nonprofit organization, 25 years old, supporting women and girls in Warren County through programs, information, education, and grants. About 6 years ago, we started the Spotlight program to honor individual women and panels of women who have made a difference to the community of Warren County. Last year, we honored the suffragists and their long struggle to win the vote for women that culminated in the passing of the 19th Amendment. Today, August 26th, is the anniversary of the day that amendment became part of the US Constitution 101 years ago. Tonight, we have a spotlight on our local women who stepped forward to create and sustain a more responsive and caring community for victims of domestic violence. Meeting this challenge has been a 40-year journey, starting in 1982 with one woman, Margia Kitts, who recognized the need. And the challenge still continues today. You will hear from 5 women about their roles and experiences with this issue. However, over the years, there have been many more men and women who have faced the issue and made contributions. They have served on boards, they have staffed telephone helplines, and they have provided support to shelters and to a thrift shop. And we salute all of them. And we'd like to give a special thanks to Rita Timbers and to Ann Thomas for their roles and for providing us with much helpful information. If you would like to stay on this program at the end, we will be responding to questions that may appear on the Zoom chat. But now I want to introduce Hannah Bement, who is a member of the Front Royal Women's Resource Center and a school teacher, and she will lead us through this journey. Hannah?
Thank you, Lee. So I am honored tonight to have the opportunity to speak with these women. And I'm really looking forward to hearing their stories, and I hope you are as well. So for each of our 5 guests tonight, I'll give a brief introduction and then ask them a few questions about their work on the domestic violence issue. If you have questions for them throughout the program, please type them into the chat box, and we'll have a few minutes at the end of the program to address them to our panelists. So our first honoree this evening is Margia Kitts. Margia Kitts was a social worker for the Warren County Department of Social Services when she proposed the initiation of the Warren County Council on Domestic Violence, or WCCDV. This was established in 1982 with the dream of providing a safe place for women in our community. She also worked with Rita Timbers to create a hotline service and volunteer training program. This hotline is still in use today. So Margia, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. It's my honor to be a part of this program. It's so exciting to have all these women together fighting for the victims of domestic violence who did not have the support they need within their own families.
It is indeed. So as the woman who first brought forward the idea to create a council on domestic violence in Warren County, first of all, thank you. And
You're
also,
welcome.
Can you tell us a bit about what your inspiration was?
Well, I was a social worker for the Warren County Department of Social Services. And in that job, I saw a lot of women who were victims of domestic violence. They came in and requested help, scared, frustrated, and not knowing who to turn to. And as a social worker, of course, I wanted to help, but our community did not have resources at that time. And so talking to them and giving them leads on resources that I knew, it was about the only thing available. Do you want me to go on to, well, anyway, so then I I went to JMU in a counseling program, and we had to develop a community program, and I did mine on developing a domestic violence program. So I didn't want that paper to be stuck in a drawer. So I talked with the director of our agency, Ann Carball, and she agreed that that could be a project. It would fall within my work guidelines. So then we established a committee. We had excellent women, Elaine Bromfield, Christine Andreae, Barbara Greco, and Earlene Orndorff, who was with the Extension Office at the time, as well as other key community people in the education system. And so we started off that way, and then it sort of developed from that point. There was interest, there was the community need, and so we moved forward.
That's excellent. It definitely sounds like a big project to get started. So what were some of the first steps that you took to really get this, on the ground?
Well, besides forming the council and, during the board, forming the board and the guidelines, specific guidelines, a fellow worker, friend of mine in Warren County, Vita Timbers, and I tried to see if we could offer any concrete services for women. Now, we were young and idealistic, and it took more than 2 women to be able to do that. But we did have trained volunteers to work on a hotline, and when there was a need, we tried to help the victims in safe housing by paying money to motels around the community. They were pretty supportive, really, that they had reduced rates. And so we felt like that was very good from the community's point of view. And of course, the police, they didn't have resources just like the Department of Social Services. So I think all the community agencies were in favor of trying to develop this.
That's good to hear. Were there any issues with the community, though, in terms of pushback or any obstacles put in the way?
When I was chair of the council, I wouldn't say we had that, because we were like all in the same, we all supported the idea and needed the help. But as the council grew and developed other issues, into a shelter, everybody wanted to have a shelter next to them. And so there are other issues, but Barbara Greco can tell you more about that.
Certainly. So your leadership helped to get this council going. How was it handing off leadership? And when did that happen?
Okay. My memory is a little foggy, so, but I did check with the courthouse, and the official council on domestic violence was formed in 1986. the chartering as a nonprofit. So Barbara Greco took over as chair when I resigned. And so she led us forward in that endeavor and did a great job. But that she and Christine have their story, and I don't think that they always had a good reception in the community.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today, Margia.
You're welcome.
I enjoyed hearing just a little bit about your story. I'm sure you have a lot more to share, and I hope I get a chance to talk with you in the future. Thank you so much. All right, our next honoree tonight is Christine Andreae. She served on the Council on Domestic Violence Board from 1983 to 1989. She helped raise money to open a women's shelter by writing grants to secure the funding to buy a safe house in Front Royal. She and Barbara Greco made presentations to church and civic groups in order to educate the community and local law enforcement about domestic violence in Warren County. Her article detailing interviews with abused women was featured in the Virginia County Magazine. So good evening, Christine. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So you were involved with the council almost from the beginning. Can you tell us what got you inspired to become involved?
I had a friend who was Irish and married an Italian surgeon. And we went to Italy to visit her because she was a very close friend. And the marriage blew up while we were there, and she ended up getting beaten up. And it was high drama, very scary, all in a foreign language. And my thought was, oh, this can only happen to Mary because she's a woman of great drama. And when we got home and a couple of years went on, and I began to realize that this was not just a one-off problem that my friend had, that it wasn't just a unique thing. And so I began to read about it and learn about it and heard about the Council on Domestic Violence and wanted to be part of that.
It's definitely unfortunate that the need is as widespread as it is. Can you tell us a little bit about what your roles were with the council?
Well, I joined and Barbara was the president. And when we decided that a shelter was really needed for the protection of women, because when they would go to the motels that had been arranged, it would all go out on the police scanner as to which motel and where they were. So the abuser knew exactly where his, significant other was.
Wow.
So yeah, no, my role was, I was secretary and I wrote grants, and Barbara and I did a talk circuit, and I wrote a piece for Virginia Country Magazine. And that the value for me of that is that I got to interview all sorts of women from all walks of life, and had a better understanding of how widespread and across classes this problem was.
Wow. So it sounds like, the domestic violence issue was a learning process for a lot of you involved in the early days of this. Can you please tell us some of what you observed along the way?
Oh, very much a learning experience. Well, I learned that women often had to come back to the shelter 4, 5, 6 times before they actually made a final break. And this was a subject of criticism. Oh, well, what good is your shelter doing if they keep coming back to it and then you made them dependent? But I think we began to see it as a learning process, and that it had to be baby steps, and that they'd leave once and then it would happen again. So learning to leave often took more than one stay. I also learned that it wasn't a one-off thing, that if there was violence, it might start just verbally, but it would usually accelerate unless something was done. And so homicide was a real risk. I also learned that men were victims too, but very underreported. And usually men who were victimized by violent women, scissors, pots and pans, whatever the battle weapon was. They didn't fight back and didn't want to report it. They were ashamed.
Wow.
What else did I learn? Oh, yeah, I guess the main thing, I really underestimated what a big bias there was in terms of the sort of patriarchal expectation that women needed to subjugate themselves to men. I kind of thought, well, this is a problem. It's you know, everybody's got to see that. Everybody's got to be for this, you know, solution. But I think one time, I don't remember if Barbara was with me or not, but I remember talking to a ministerial council, and one of the ministers, I asked them all, I said, don't the women you in your care, in your parish, in your you know, whatever your purview was, don't the women talk to you about this? And one of them said, oh yes. And I tell you, if my wife talked to me the way those women talk to their husbands, I'd want to pop her too. And this was in the Ministerial Association. So that kind of set, that was a learning experience.
Bit of a shock there. Yeah, I'm not sure how I would have responded to that sort of comment.
Oh, I think we just were polite and nodded, and you know, I mean, men were not comfortable with this topic at all. There were a lot of jokes and, oh, you better watch out, you know, she's on the side of women, you better be careful.
Unfortunate. Can you tell us about some of your efforts to educate the community about domestic violence?
Oh, yes. Let me see. Well, one of the problems we had was that the police and the sheriff's department really hated domestic violence cases. So they'd go there, and then the wife would say, no, don't arrest him. You know, we're okay, whatever. So that was a problem for them. We did hear about a cop down in Richmond who had started a program that had educated the Richmond police force so that the homicide rate had dropped dramatically. I don't remember by what percent. And that was homicide due to domestic violence. So we arranged we did a little fundraising, and we arranged to have this cop come and talk to our cops. I think cop to cop. That's, you know, it's a no-brainer. Well, we had him do 2 sessions. And so that the sheriff and the chief of police both promised that they would send all their men to these sessions. And it was in the Calvary Episcopal Church Hall. And the first session came, and there was our cop all going to explain about his program, and nobody showed up. It was just us. So dear Elaine Bromfield, who ran the Warren Sentinel with her husband, Ted, went to Ted, and Ted went down to the police chief and to the sheriff and said, you know, this isn't going to look very good in the paper. So all of a sudden, you know, there was a sort of a smattering of law enforcement people at each session, not the room as we expected, but so that was one effort to educate our community.
Sounds like a hard-won small victory, probably one among many. But thank you so much for Christine, for all your hard work, and for speaking with me tonight about a bit of your story. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you know, thank you for your commitment and interest. Thank you.
All right, our third honoree this evening will be Barbara Greco. Barbara Greco served on the first Warren County Council on Domestic Violence Board and continued for over 6 years. The early years were spent in research, surveying numerous agencies, and resulting in the confirmation that domestic violence was indeed an issue in Warren County that needed attention. She helped secure sufficient funds to buy a safe house and to hire staff. During her time as president of the board, a home was purchased for the first shelter, policies and procedures were established, and staff was hired. So hopefully Barbara will be able to join us for a few questions here. Hi, Barbara. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
Definitely. Can you tell us a bit about what drew you to the issue of domestic violence and what inspired you to get involved in this important work?
Well, I'd known victims of domestic violence, and one in particular I'd known for quite a while. And she related the story that from the time she had married as a young woman, her husband had been abusive towards her, physically abusive. And she said that finally there was one occasion when she knew that if he abused her again, he would kill her. And that was one of the main things that prompted me to work with this organization.
Wow. Definitely some deep inspiration there. So how did you and others conclude that domestic violence was such a widespread issue here in our community?
Well, as Margia had indicated, we conducted a survey with all of the social service type agencies in Warren County, with the police department, sheriff's department, schools. And from that data, it was quite obvious that there was a problem. And we wanted to substantiate that before we move forward.
So can you tell us a bit about how the need specifically for a shelter was determined, and then what steps did you take to help make that a reality?
Well, from the after the survey, one of the first steps we did was to have a hotline. And as Margia had indicated, we had been trained for that. And most of the women, and there were men on the board as well, but most of us served on the hotline. And from the hotline, those individuals who were in need of shelter were put in local motels, which was not the most secure way to do it. So it was after we had done that for a while that we really realized we needed a shelter of our own, someplace that hopefully would be unknown to people. So that was the step there.
Definitely. So what was the community reaction to having a shelter established here locally?
Well, this is the thing, I get all emotional about this, but it was very touching. The people of Warren County, all of the people that I had met and to whom Christine and I and Margia and others on the board had given presentations, they were very supportive. So they realized the need. And I think when people are united and they have people they can trust, they will come forward with their support, their money, and their encouragement. So that was what gave us the ability to move forward, was the support from the community. And it was really overwhelming. It was fantastic.
That is wonderful to hear. Wow, it sounds like you accomplished a lot. For example, a shelter director was hired during your time on the council. So can you tell us a bit about like that process, and how do you find a candidate that's qualified for that? Where does the funding come from?
Well, as Christine said, she was very active in writing grants, and we had fundraisers throughout Warren County. Churches and other and businesses were very supportive. Your big corporations such as DuPont and many others donated to us. So the funding was there. And one of the things that we were not surprised to learn, everyone thought, I shouldn't say everyone, most people acknowledged the importance of this and wanted a shelter. But the old expression, not in my backyard. So they were very supportive until it came down to the point of actually buying the shelter. So we were under contract. Actually, the day we were going to closing, I received a telephone call from an individual, and he said, would you consider, you being the council, would you consider not buying this house? Would you consider buying another one? Now, mind you, we were literally hours away from going to closing. And I explained this, and I said, after we've purchased this home, if your group feels the same way and they can find us a location, a safe location that meets the criteria, then we would certainly consider it. We never heard from that individual again, or the people that he represented. So it was upsetting, but that was it. This shelter itself, I think, went off very well. We had, minor problems. We were fortunate in that there were other shelters near us. That is, there was one in Winchester. We learned a lot from them. So they made some of the errors for us. So we learned from their errors, and that made our shelter a stronger one in so many respects. So we were quite fortunate in that.
Well, that's good to hear. Let's see. Can you tell me maybe what part of the work or part of your time on this issue you're most proud of? Can you give an example?
Well,
I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
yes. To be able to help others in a significant way, and to actually be able to see the result of your efforts was extremely rewarding. So I feel honored that I was asked to serve in that committee. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I can see, you're emotional about this, that it means a lot to you.
So Margia, as I mentioned many times before, deserves a tremendous amount of credit because it would not have happened without her. But having said that, it would not have happened without the efforts of each person on that board, as well as the community. So it really was a tremendous vote of confidence from the community. And well, it's just a good feeling to know that you're doing something that is beneficial and that others would do likewise had they had the opportunity, were they in our position.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Definitely meaningful work that I, for one, appreciate you and the others having done. So thank you so much for sharing part of your story with us tonight, Barbara.
I'm happy to do so. Thank you.
All right, our next honoree is Rita Biggs. Rita Biggs served as a VISTA volunteer to the Warren County Council on Domestic Violence from 1988 to 1991. In 1999, she became the Domestic Violence Services Coordinator, working directly with survivors. She became executive director in 2003 and retired in 2010. But in 2013, she learned that the women's shelter was in crisis. So along with Lee Smith-Osina and others, she began working on a way to bring domestic violence services back into our area. She was responsible for securing a 501c3 status and helped raise funds for the creation of the Phoenix Project. So Rita, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And I'll just start by saying I love the poster behind you. Is there a story behind that?
Yeah, well, a friend of mine gave it to me. Actually, it was one of our employees, and she said because she thought about me when she saw it. So I have just always kept it, and it's in this room where my grandchildren sleep when they come, and I want them to see it. So,
That's wonderful, wonderful. Rita the Riveter with us tonight.
right.
All right, can you tell us, Rita, what first got you involved in the domestic violence issue and why you've stayed involved over the years?
And what first got me involved was these ladies who just talked, because I was involved in some community organizations, and they all came and talked to those organizations about the need for a domestic violence program. So I was kind of aware of the need, and that there was plans to get a program started and to try to get a shelter. And then I heard about they were looking for a VISTA volunteer. If you don't know, VISTA is Volunteers in Service to America. It's kind of like Peace Corps, only you stay here instead of going somewhere else. And they were looking for a volunteer coordinator for the program. And I was volunteering in everything at that time. It just seemed like I'm a volunteer. In fact, Tammy used to tell me to sit on my hands. But I knew that I could do that. I knew what made volunteers tick. And so my job was to recruit volunteers and train them, and then get them started volunteering in the program. And the other thing I loved about VISTA was the training. You get pretty much as much training as you're willing to go to, and they provide that, pay for it. So it was training about program development, training about volunteer coordination things, how to motivate people, and also training about domestic violence.
Sounds like a lot of very important skills there that you could learn and then bring to this organization. What a wonderful resource you must have been and continue to be. So you've played a lot of different roles within these organizations over the years. Can you tell us a bit about them, and maybe what was your favorite role to play?
As I said, I had all that training. And so when the VISTA position was up, I was kind of, all the other ladies in the community I worked with, the professionals, I kind of wanted to be like them when I grew up. So I went to JMU and got my degree in social work. And after I graduated, I got a job in Winchester doing job training and job placement, and working with what at that time was called displaced homemakers. So that was really interesting, but I found most of them were displaced because of domestic violence. Mm. It was just, I was like, it's everywhere. It affects everybody. And I just saw an ad where back here in Warren County, the Council on Domestic Violence was hiring a program coordinator for the domestic violence program. And so that seemed like where I needed to be. And so I came back, I was hired into that position. I was there for a couple of years. And then when our executive director left, I really was hesitant to apply for that job, but I know that some of you on this call probably know Beverly Morrison. And Beverly came by and talked to me one-on-one and said, Rita, this is your job. You know you can do it. I know you're the right person. I'm behind you 100%. And because of that encouragement, I did apply for the job, and I got the job, and I stayed there until I retired. And I don't know, I liked all of the roles. Probably my favorite was actually the domestic violence program coordinator, because to actually work one-on-one with someone and see them actually start to realize that they're in an abusive situation, that they have value as a human being, and that they get their confidence up and they can move on. That's the greatest feeling in the world.
Wow, what an impact that you could make there, and probably did make for so many women. That's amazing. Wow. Could you tell us, kind of what happened to the council and the Harmony Place shelter and the Second Chance thrift shop that raised funds for these initiatives?
People still ask about that. And I always feel when they ask, like they're looking for someone to blame, or they're trying to get to the root of the problem. What went wrong? What happened? And it was like a perfect storm of things that happened. There is no blame. There is no one person, one thing that was done wrong that you can look at. A lot of things just started going on at the same time. The thrift store was bringing in money, but not as much as it had before. And that's around the same time that Blue Ridge Hospice opened, and we know what a great thrift store that is still, came into the area. So there was more competition. Walmart moved in. Walmart had very inexpensive clothes, sometimes less than the thrift shop. So people were going there for new clothes. It just seemed like there were a lot of things happening there. One of the big things that happened was changes in grant funding, because a large amount of the money came from grant funding. And originally, grants would give you a chunk of money, and you had promised what you would do with it. You had a plan, and you would do those things for that money. It started changing in that you had to do those things first, and then they would give you the money. Everything went to a reimbursable basis. And most nonprofits don't have $100,000 sitting in the bank that they can upfront spend and then get reimbursed for. And so it was a struggle to always stay ahead of your money, to do the work, to pay your staff to do the work, and then get the money. And so that became, I think, the biggest issue. Another thing, it became popular then and still is now, they find it works better, is housing money, because we had gotten some housing money, but everything now is housing first. You put the person in the housing and then you provide services, but you have to have the money to put them in the housing first. And then you get reimbursed for what you did. And the board had called me. They said the director had resigned. Could I come in fill in for a little while they figured things out? And I came in, and to be honest, I sat in the office and I looked at some of the things that were going on, and I cried. And I talked to some of the board members. They went to see a nonprofit lawyer, someone who specialized in nonprofit things. And they came back from Harrisonburg and they said, we've got to close it down. There is no choice. The lawyers, everyone who's looked at this says, we cannot make this work anymore. We don't have the money to do it. And it was devastating for everybody. It was devastating for me because I felt like I had my whole life in there. It was for all those people out in the community who worked, our founding mothers, as I always refer to them, for the staff people who were working there then, for some people who were actually in shelter at that time and in transitional housing who were told this is no more. And I don't have anything else to say about it. There was no way out of it at that point.
That sounds like it must have been very frustrating and disheartening. But then you were involved with the creation of the Phoenix Project, which rose out of the ashes. So Can you tell us kind of briefly about your effort and involvement with that?
We really have to thank United Way and Lee Smith-Osina, because she was determined that we were not going to let that go. And at that time in her office, Bob Bolter, who is, my mind just went, FaithWorks organization, was in her office, and he had a lot of experience, as did Lee, in developing organizations and working in housing and coordinating different people. And so United Way called a community meeting and the room was packed. So many people came. And again, I told them it's the problem didn't go away. We don't have the services, but we know from police reports and people calling agencies in other communities that domestic violence didn't just disappear when the services disappeared. And so it's, where do we start and what can we focus on? And one of the things was that lack of 501c3 kept us from getting donations and applying for any money. And FaithWorks and Bob Bolter, then they had a 501c3. And so they pulled us under them to work with them. And they became our agency that we would act under their 501c3. United Way gave us some money because they were going to give the old agency money. So they just kind of said, well, since we're not giving that away, we will give you a grant, and that amount we had to write a grant. But, had to write for it and all that. We decided, with the help of especially Tammy Sharpe, as to what were the most basic services we could do. We needed a hotline and we needed a staff person. And that's where Tammy stepped in and became that person. And
All right. Well, Rita, that seems like the perfect, yeah, it seems like the perfect segue then to our last guest this evening. But at first I want to say thank you for all of your work.
having us.
Yes, thank you so much, and for sharing your story with us tonight. So our final honoree this evening is Tammy Sharpe. Tammy Sharpe was a sexual assault advocate for the Warren County Council on Domestic Violence, and then the Domestic Violence Program Coordinator. She began the Warren County Child Assault Prevention Program. She worked for the Warren County Council on Domestic Violence until the agency closed in October of 2013. As executive director of the Phoenix Project, she continues to lead current staff and board to further the work that was started to make Warren County a safer place to be. She is proud, and should be proud, of her part in the long line of women who saw the need in the community and stepped up to help. So thank you, Tammy, for being here with us tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So you first worked with the council in 2004. Can you tell us a bit about what your duties were and how long you served? What was that like?
Yeah, so I began as a part-time sexual assault advocate. So I worked nights, one-on-one with the clients in the shelter. And I did that for about a year. And around that same time, Rita was actually one of the ones, her and Paula Johnson brought me into the council and hired me and gave me my first job. And Rita was stepping into the executive director position, which left her position open. And I knew that she's a very petite woman, but she has very big shoes to fill. But I gathered my courage, was encouraged by my husband to just give it a try and apply for the job, and was thrilled that I was then made a full-time domestic violence program coordinator. And I held that position until the agency closed.
Wow. And now you're the executive director of the Phoenix Project. So can you tell us about how that role came about?
Yes, I mean, it was never, Rita mentored me through my whole career in this field. And she pushed me to do things that I didn't want to do and to learn things that I didn't think I needed to learn. And looking back, I see that God and the world was preparing me to step into this position, because those skills became very handy when there was a need for an executive director. And so, yeah, we opened the agency. We started with $65,000, and we were on a roll. We were going. We had really good relationships with funders because the program had been run so well that we had a very good reputation with them. And so when we were able to apply for government grants through Department of Social Services, that opened up and helped us to expand. And, the women that came before us, like Rita was saying, I mean, they paved the way for this agency. And they are our founding mothers. And I've spoke of them every pavement I've hit. Anybody that would listen to my story, I always give them honor and praise because they started this much needed process.
Building on the shoulders of giants, definitely.
Yes.
So what support do women still need today? And why is this need still there after all this time and all this work?
Right. It's amazing. They still need a lot of the same supports. And as everyone knows, we don't have a shelter yet. And so we've come full circle, and they're a lot safer in the secure places we put them, and it's kept private. But yeah, I mean, they still need housing. They still need someone to come alongside them and help them find their worth and their self-confidence, and to empower them to walk through the process from victim to survivor. And we've learned so much from the women that we serve. They have taught us so much more than we could ever teach them. So yeah, the same services are still needed because they are fundamentally what this is made on, is the need for support for victims of domestic violence. And so as housing gets complicated and all of that, they still need advocates. They still need the community support. They still need financial support to get back on their feet. And so I will say, my experience with law enforcement, we have a program called the Lethality Assessment Program. So when an officer goes on the call, they call us right away. We get to speak to the victim right there at that time. And the Front Royal Police Department has really just enveloped our program. They invite us for training all the time. And so I noticed someone asked if it was the same, and it's not. Law enforcement has come leaps and bounds.
That is wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
I'm very glad to hear that you all have that support and that integration.
Yes.
To get there right away and help those women. So it sounds like some of the same challenges exist in terms of the issues the women are facing, but are there any challenges that are different now in our today, in our maybe more modern society, than what the women or your organization might have faced in the past?
I think that, one of the things that comes to mind for me is the electronics, right? So they can be tracked through their cell phones, through their laptops, through their cars. So all of that complicates safety. The need to have a smartphone to get internet access is something that victims in the past didn't have that need, and they often don't have the money. So we provide smartphones in minutes for them. So those kinds of technology things have really upped the problems and the problems of safety. Children that have to leave the home when they're in virtual school. I mean, this pandemic has definitely showed the need for support for the women and children that are in these environments.
Certainly. Yeah, as a school teacher, I have encountered the same issues. So thank you for being there to support those people who need those services now more than ever. So, maybe the last question I will ask, and I will say we're going to put up information about the Phoenix Project in just a moment on a slide. But can you tell us what services you do offer right now for women in the community? So specifically, what could people come to you for?
Sure. So I do want to say, I do not do this alone. I have an awesome board. I have staff. We have a total of 5 of us gals here in this office now, and they are some of the most dedicated, hardworking staff members that I have ever met in my life. And they touch people every day, and they're just amazing and a pleasure to have and be around every day. And they work really hard for these clients. They will go to the ends of the earth to get what they need. And so, I forgot the question.
What services do you offer? Yes.
Yes, well, the most important, right? So yeah, we offer the basic. We still have a hotline that's ran 24/7. In addition to that, we have a LAP line, which is law enforcement's direct contact with us when they go out on a call. So we have 2 hotlines. We go to court with clients. We have supportive counseling. We do job coaching. Anything that they need, we will find a way. If we can't provide it, we will reach out to one of our awesome community partners and try to find someone who can help them. One of the things I'm really excited about is realizing that housing and realizing that domestic violence is the #1 cause of homelessness for women and children. The #1 cause, the displaced, right?
Right.
And so we're able to offer funds to help prevent them from becoming homeless. Because once you enter into that system of homelessness, it can be hard to get out of. And so if we can prevent that from happening, that is the better. So we can do things like help with utility and rent and those types of things, car repairs, so that they can stay employed, childcare, that kind of thing. And that's a wonderful addition and an answer to the housing problem that we have. We also do prevention. So Rita mentioned the Child Assault Prevention Project was something I was very passionate about. And we do boundary trainings in the middle school. We do a safe dates with high school students. So teaching boundaries and what to do if someone crosses your boundaries, how to get some help for that. So all that stuff is so exciting.
Definitely important work. And thank you, Tammy, and everyone in your organization for the efforts that you undertake on part of to make our community safer. It's wonderful. So yes, thank you so much for continuing your important work in our community. Now, we'll be posting the Phoenix Project and 24-hour hotline information on the screen now. So if you need that or know someone who could use these resources, please pass on this information. In a moment, Lee Meyer is going to give us a few closing remarks, and then we'll take questions from the chat from our panelists. So if you want to stay with us for the Q&A, please do continue to type any questions that you might have into the chat. And we look forward to talking a bit more with our guests about those questions. So up next is Lee. Take it away, Lee.
Okay, well, thank you so much to our panelists for that incredible presentation and that story that everybody participated in. It really is a huge story that has gone on for years and is still with us. So thank you so much to them for participating. Thank you to the audience, and thank you to the committee who helped put this program together. Joellen McNeil, Lynn Beament, Hannah Beament, and Melanie Mullinex. We certainly hope you will attend future events of the Front Royal Women's Resource Center. And we thank you for your support and also for your support to the incredible work of the Phoenix Project. And now we will go to the chat. I'll turn it back over to Hannah, and she will lead us through any questions you may have. And thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Lee. All right, I guess I will start by asking all of my guests to turn their videos back on so that I can address questions, or you can raise your hand if you'd like to field a question from the chat. So we have a few here. Tammy already sort of addressed this, but maybe if anyone would like to talk about, law enforcement in Warren County, being now more enlightened regarding domestic violence issues. I, for one, am very heartened to hear that there's been progress on that front.
They work really well. We work together as a team. I think they understand now that we're not there to get in the way or to mess up any investigations. We're just there to advocate and be a support. And because we can get to victims, there's a better chance that they won't have to come back to that home again. And that if it goes to court, she might follow through. And so they're seeing the benefits of that. And that's really important.
That is excellent. Let's see, we talked about the direct services Phoenix offers women today. Joellen asked, what are the most pressing needs in our community right now?
For funding is always an issue. I mean, it's all these years later, right? And we're still saying, can you support us in some way? Each one of these ladies personally support Phoenix Project. And that goes to show you that they don't just say that's what's important to them, they show that that's what's important to them. We do have a needs list. And if anybody wants more detail on that kind of thing, please just email me, call, but financial support is always a top need in any organization. Watch out for our fundraisers and our events, and that's another great way you can help.
That's wonderful. Do you have any fundraisers coming up, Tammy?
We do. We have a very fun event in October the 14th from 5 to 7. We have a wine pool event. So much fun. You get a cork, whatever number is on your cork, it matches up with a bottle of wine or a free wine tasting. The fun is that you don't know if you're going to get a $3 bottle of wine or a $50 bottle of wine. So it's a lot of fun. And that's all. Information's on our website too. And if you're on the mailing list for the Women's Resource Center, they include all of our stuff in their emails as well, which we really appreciate.
Excellent. Well, I'm seeing a lot of lauds for you all in the chat. Brava, ladies, such important work you do. They're expressing deep respect and gratitude to all of our guests tonight. Let's see here. Some more thank yous. Real joy seeing and hearing from you. So I have one final question, and I don't know if this sort of statistic is something you all keep, but do you have any idea how many women have been helped, women and also men in our community, I suppose, have been helped by these efforts over the years? Do we have any sense of that, or is it just countless? Margia, did you have something you wanted to say?
No,
Any
I
idea?
really don't have statistics to
All right.
substantiate that.
With a whole lot of digging, I could probably almost find it out. We've come a long way. We keep all of our statistics in a database now. It's not written by hand or any of that. So yeah, but I know I know the clients we served at Harmony Place in the thousands. It's probably been in the thousands here. So it's a huge issue that still happens. Yeah.
Well, definitely sounds like you all have made a difference in our community. And I'll echo the comments in the chats by saying thank you. If we could all give you a round of applause right now, we would. I know everyone who is listening isn't able to chime in audibly, but I'm sure they're singing your praises right now. So thank you. And of course, also thank you to all of the hard workers that we weren't able to have here sharing their stories with us tonight. So thank you. And thank you all for joining us, everyone who is listening this evening. All right. Well, I hope you all have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.